And thank you for picking up this subject that is very dear to many of us here in the panel for sure, and I'm sure also in the audience. And I'd like to introduce our wonderful audience, our wonderful panel that is not only gender balanced, I can see, but also diverse in geography, experience, and so on. So let me start with my right, Diana Elbaum, producer from Belgium. Elena Daniels. You have the names, I suppose. Yes. Elena Danielsson from Sweden, producer as well. Peter Dinges from the FFA. FFA is, as you know, the federal fund in Germany. Then we have Lucia Recalde, that is the head of the media program in the European Commission. Then we have Dariusz Jablonski, producer as well, from Poland. Then we have Esther Van Nessel, that is the most international of us, that is based in Switzerland and is a producer and distributor, sales agent. Now, a few words how this conference is going to work. It's divided in two parts. The first part is more on the market trends. The second part is more on the regulatory aspects. And we have the colleagues from the observatory. They're going to do an introduction, both in market trends and in the regulatory framework. And then we start the discussion, and at the end, we will have the Q&A. So I think we can start. Well, thank you, Gilles. I think with this, we can go home. We're happy. Everything is fine. The numbers are right, correct. We're doing a good job. But I think what would be interesting to do for us here in the panel, and I invite you, colleagues around the beautiful table, is to read between the lines, actually read between the numbers, if I can say so, and try to understand if all co-productions are real, more successful than 100% national films. Do they all circulate more? Do they all generate revenues more than 100% national films? Are they exported beyond Europe, for instance, better than 100% national films? I think our role here is to distinguish situations that are different and understand what is the rationale, the logic behind it. If it is true that co-productions circulate better, that co-productions perform better, they make more revenues, why aren't we making more co-productions? If producers are at the same time talented, creative people and professionals in the business, they would be doing more co-productions because they perform better. The reality is a lot more complex, I suppose, and I would like to start maybe with Dariusz. Dariusz, you are an experienced producer in Poland. You have done many co-productions. Some of them have been even controversial in the topic you've chosen. Courageous, they circulated, some more, some less. What's your take on this? Are co-productions really circulating better? Do you do co-productions because you believe they circulate better, or do you do it for other reasons? Do you do it because you cannot find enough money in Poland? That is maybe the idea behind most of us. If you cannot find money in your country, you knock on the door of other countries. What is your take on this?
First of all, I would like to say that understanding co-production as economical way of making business would be offending the whole room here, because we are all for co-productions, otherwise we'd be not sitting there, and we understand, we see each other, we know each other for years. We are making co-production as a way of life, as a way of demonstrating our European identity, and I strongly believe in it, in this fact. I want to say that coming from new members countries, which nowadays means something different, I would like to stress that I was a witness of real miracle more than Western countries. So in '95, I was pitching my project in Amsterdam, being pushed to pitch it as a German because Poland was not eligible for media initiatives. Esther van Messer became a Swiss distributor. Alison Heidhoff, one of the organizers of this conference, was my co-producer. And this way we did first ever co-production and it started. So from our country's point of view, co-productions is way of going out and showing our stories through different meanings. First of all, being able to build them, to make them, because lack of money is one of the issues. Second, being distributed thanks to the co-productions in other countries, and we desperately need to be understood in many sense, and if we are not seen, if we are not known, we are not understood, that's obvious. But also I mentioned a third dimension when the previous period of media was closing, because I think it's still underestimated, and the time is showing that I was right. I was indicating the political impact of building a pluralism and freedom of expression through co-productions. And this is completely new for you, probably, from Western countries, because if we have a monopoly sources of funding for development, for production, for distribution, it's very easy to close the freedom of expression in film. And only co-production and also Brussels' decision about developing certain projects was like supporting independent creativity in very practical sense. And in my opinion, because if you're coming from Eastern Europe, you have to be political, obviously. In my opinion, this is one of the crucial issues. Co-production is a way of building real European creativity in very live meaning. Because if we are not, it's more and more. I created 12 years ago Scriptease, which is thanks to media, is a successful script writing program for Eastern European best writers, and more and more of the participants of Scriptease is saying this is the project which I don't believe get funding in my country because I'm forbidden to make this subject. So this is really crucial understanding. But also, in wider sense, I would like to mention that figures are fantastic. And I really believe I made like 27 or 28 co-productions, and they were really successful outside of our countries. But I would like to ask also, to be a bit bitter, how successful they were in national market, because I'm quite bitter in this, because I think that there are no mechanisms supporting distribution in domestic countries for these co-productions. And then having Silver Bear for Lexi German Junior film 3 years ago, I got, with many difficulties, distribution in Poland, and I got 2,000 admissions because there was no support for promotion and for distribution. So great figures, but it's not easy that it's done. And I think that we have to be satisfied for how much we've done for a little money given to EURIMAGES to make producers interested in co-production, for media to make us really feeling co-production as a habit of doing things where we don't do it for money, but because we love it and we understand the value. But also there are some downsides of this.
Thank you. You brought up many topics. I will bring essentially two because I think can be further developed. The first one is one of the reasons why you make co-production is also because of the topics you've chosen and the idea you want to spread beyond national borders. And the second one is the holistic approach to co-production. That is, I think, a topic that is dear to Esther. We were talking about this 5 minutes before the beginning, and I will let you develop this further. But before we do this, I thought it would be nice to go on the other side of Europe. And we talked about Poland and the specificity of Poland right after the wall and so on, and building new relations with the rest of Europe. Diana, why do you do co-productions? You're a champion of co-productions. You come from a country that is, in general, champions in co-production numbers. I think I was reading the statistic, Jill, and I think Belgium is one of the countries that has increased the number of even majority co-productions. So it's in the last year. So there is some countries decrease, some other countries increase, and Belgium is one of the champions, and we witnessed this in EURIMAGES as well. So what is it? Why do you love it?
I'm not sure. Does it work? Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, thank you, Darius. Thank you. I don't think we love it. I think it's DNA. It's just in French-speaking Belgium, you can't do a majority. It's very tough to do a majority just with the Belgian money. That's kind of a curious situation. Because it's a tiny, tiny market, and remember, we speak French. So we have this huge neighbor next door. So our market is probably where the, you know, the hole in our system is the fact that our market is too small to just make the difference that will allow us to produce 100% film in Belgium, and then also the audience. I mean, Darius was speaking about it. It's very different. You can't speak just Belgian. You have to analyze both sides, the Flemish side and the French side. We won't get into that now. So it's a DNA and it's a survival mean for a producer to actually go and co-produce, because if I want to make my film, whether it's first film, second film, or whatever, I need to go out of Belgium. And we have very nice neighbors. That's good news. So, you know, we've done it for, I mean, ever since I started working, without the, you know, the regional funding and without the tax shelter, many, many years ago, we were co-producing from the start. The second thing is, then, you know, it developed over the past almost 20 years now, a little less than that, when the tax shelter started, which is still very strong, and then the regional funding came on board. We have 3 of them for such a tiny country. So there's a lot of money rolling in. Now the question is, what's happening with the cultural funds, which is one of my biggest questions, because, you know, we can speak about entertainment market and an entertainment film, which is totally okay, and then comes with bigger budget, and then will be, you know, benefit a lot from those additional financial structures. The thing is that when you come with a film from Darius, from Poland, that needs a voice and needs money to get the voice out, where is the money? It's smaller films, it's cultural author, whatever you want to call them, and then you find out that the system doesn't keep on working for those films. It used to be like that, without we had all the great money. So I'm actually not at all sewing the branch on which I'm sitting, but I'm more and more questioning myself, can we help all the voices? And isn't that the principle of co-production also? And I think we're going to be facing this issue about where is the refunding of the culture in our countries? And how can we sustain what's happening in the world with the voices of cinema when we can actually only go to cultural funds? And I know how difficult it is. And to join Darius again on what he said, I sometimes co-produce film and I can't find distribution in Belgium. Just can't. So I'm really happy of the figures that I saw, but I feel that I'm the figure outside. You know, you had like 1% added up to 96. I felt that I was a 4%. And it's a huge question. I can't answer, I just can open.
I don't think anybody has an answer to that, but I suppose the reason why you co-produce vary from country to country and from company to company, of course. The rationale for a smaller territory like Belgium, where 2 languages, for instance, and with the complexity of having a neighboring country that is a huge market of more than 60 million inhabitants, is different than a producer being established in France. And funny enough, I was reading numbers, and like many of you, I would have thought until then that the reason why you co-produce is essentially financial. The market is so small that you cannot find enough resources in your own territory, and you knock on the door of your neighbors. But looking at numbers, the champions of co-production in Europe are countries like France and Germany. So if that was true, producers established in those countries would not need necessarily to co-produce, because they would find the resources within their own territory. Now, reality is a lot more complex than that because it depends on the topic. And even though you are established in Germany, not necessarily that topic is sexy for that territory, and he or she, whoever the producer is, needs to find other resources. Now, we have warmed up with a positive approach. We are all very happy. Co-productions circulate better, and we do good films, and they sometimes have a hard time in national territories. On the basis of my experience, reality is a lot more complex than this. Peter, what's your take on this? I know that Germany has this double position, double take on co-productions. The films that are more successful in Germany are not co-productions.
Thank you very much. Well, you're completely right. Co-productions are successful, and well, we could end the discussion here because everybody agrees, and now we have the very good numbers. But let me have a look at those numbers. I know your numbers, and they are, as always, correct. But let me take it from another side. National film does not only consist in one genre. You have different genres. You have children films, which travel from time to time, but European children film, at least German children film, do not travel. You have documentaries. Documentaries sometimes go into co-production, yes, but only a small share of them, for different reasons we can discuss later on. You have the first and second feature films after film school. Okay, all those films are hard to put in co-production. You have to take them out. And if you take all those films out, the picture changes. And it changes a lot. If you look at the top 10 in Germany, for instance, in the last year, there was no single co-production, not even one. And in the last 5 years, we had national productions like Fuck You Goethe 1, Fuck You Goethe 2, Fuck You Goethe 3, making an overall audience of 25 million people. This is a market share. So, you're right. I would say, if I look carefully at co-production, how they perform in Germany, it's hard for me because last year it was a disastrous year. And you have a market share of around 5%. That's not a lot. Although the films released, there you have almost 40% of co-productions. So meaning 40% of the films making 5%. Okay, it was a disastrous year. The year before it was more than 15. So it was a very good number. But these are the figures, and they do not perform very well in the market. What does it mean? The distributors who have to invest in P&A money, in promotion, in support, they have doubts. They don't always take co-productions. It's a problem. So we have to persuade them. And if I come from this side, just for the audience, I'm a strong supporter of co-productions. Don't take me wrong. But what we have to do is to face the problems. All those good figures are important to persuade those distributors, are important to persuade other producers who still hesitate to make co-productions. Yes, they exist. There are some. And I could name a few, which I won't do because I keep it secret. There are some German producers which are very successful, which normally work with highly known directors, which do not go into co-production because they say, why shall I share my revenues? Why shall I share the distribution in Europe? I'm successful. I can distribute the film. Why should I co-produce it? On the other hand, there are good developments. And when I look at the Berlin Film Festival, the last one, and I look at 3 films in competition from the German side, then I would say, well, Transit, the first time that Christian Petzold and Schrampton went into co-production. Then I look at 3 Days in Quiberon, a co-production. Then I look in The Fade, a co-production. Then I look at Toni Erdmann, a co-production. So the top art house films in Germany turned to be co-productions. And we had just 2 weeks ago the German César, the German Film Prize. And it was a battle between 2 co-productions. And 3 days in Quiberon and in the fate of Fatih Akin. And on the other hand, I see France the first time with Mustang applying for the Oscars with a co-production, multilateral.
From Turkey.
Yeah. So these are developments which make me happy, but be careful with the numbers and don't be too happy. There is a long way to go.
Thank you. I think there was a reality check. Well deserved. A reality check that we needed because numbers are clear, co-productions circulate better, they generate more revenues, but within those numbers there are so many different situations that needs to be broken down somehow and distinguished. The numbers you're giving, Gilles and the observatory, are confirming the feeling that I've always had of working in EURIMAGES for so many years, is that most probably 100% national films are extremely successful, some of them, not all of them, in their national territory. Think of comedies, that some of them have a hard time circulating, and they are extremely successful in the domestic territories. A territory like Germany or Italy, some of those films are unexportable, but they generate a lot of revenues in-house. Then you have smaller co-productions that maybe they do not generate a lot of money within the co-producing countries, but they do circulate a lot better in not only festivals, also theatrically, and they are exported, so they also generate revenues. We see this very clearly in EURIMAGES. When you have co-production with a certain budget that have some audience, larger audience expectations, they perform less better in terms of circulation than smaller co-productions in terms of budget, but those circulate all over 40 territories. Maybe they generate small revenues in each territory, but when you up them up, they give the numbers that the observatory has generously shared with us. This could be one of the explanations. The reality is very complex, and within those aggregated numbers, there are many details that we could analyze. Now, let's go back to the professionals, and maybe Esther. Esther, there was something that Darius was saying that I think touched you, and it was this holistic approach to co-productions. When we were talking before we came up here on stage, you told me about one of these ideas that you had in your mind, and that is so we can, let's have a prospective approach and see what the future could reserve to us.
I also want to thank you, Roberto. I want to side up with Darius figuratively, really, because I really believe in the freedom of speech and the necessity to get creation out there. And while I'm one of the very few ones probably in this room who is not subsidized in any way, shape or form, because I'm mostly doing international distribution of documentaries, and I believe I have to live from the market, I have to pay my employees from the market. I actually am a very firm believer in subsidies, and I think if we didn't have artists do things that are unthinkable, nothing would change. Nobody would have an iPhone, for example, because it didn't exist, so who wanted it, There's a fabulous quote from Ben Gurion who says, it's not about what the people want, it's about what's wanted for the people. That's a big difference, and I think it's our job to get out there what's wanted for the people, and it's a big responsibility. So I think it's a big political job that we have to do, because the market wants renovate your house shows, a little thriller, nothing much to think of, maybe some things to feel with. And this is where I come to, because I work mostly with documentaries, I observe a tendency in the last years that we call back to the backyard. Nobody wants to see anything foreign anymore. Everybody just wants their own stories, and I actually can even understand it, because you wake up in the morning and on your phone there's notifications from Korea and America and I don't know where. So when you start watching your own programs, you want to be where you are. So that goes against the co-productions, because I don't really need to see anything else. I want to understand my own world. There's a huge trend in nonfiction that goes to regionalism. And you all know this, you know, the vegan food, it's the same trend. It's all this let's stay healthy kind of here. And I think that's a big challenge. I also believe that it's very important that we keep on looking at the market, but that we don't bow for it. And I think a lot of our stories that we're telling are very national, and that's where your numbers come in, because a lot of films don't need to go somewhere else, and that's okay. But others do, and they have to get those platforms. What I was curious about is the money flow. You say, you know, so how much money does it cost to do a co-production versus how much money comes actually back in? That was the other number that I would have liked to see, because it's also expensive to do co-production. So I believe it has to make sense, and it has to make sense mostly in content and then also technically. And I'll come to what Roberto wants me to say, is that I believe from our creative side, we are responsible to do more vertical co-productions instead of horizontal ones. I mean that you have to talk, that you should know where you want to go before you set out. And it can be a small target audience. It doesn't have to be the red carpet. But be a bit realistic and talk to your peers and have your ministers of foreign affairs that will feed back to you what you're doing. I think the worst, there's always exceptions, but the worst films I'm seeing these days are the films that are made by director, producer, working alone with some staff they're hiring, and not having this sometimes really hurtful ping pong and feedback and saying, listen, this doesn't work and you need to cast differently, or you need to think differently, or let's do another ending, or let's discuss, or let's rewrite. I think that's the beauty of this, that we're working in a team, and I think we should work more in the time axis. And I think the political structures should fund that more. There should not be the need to prove yourself every day with every project and every director from zero. There should be some sort of trust in the producers.
I'll come back to that with Lucia, because this touches on distribution, and the media program is clearly a champion on this. But before we go to the media program, let me ask Elena Danielsson. Elena, you come from a part of the world where co-productions were probably invented before the Franco-Italian treaty. That is a formal treaty, clearly, and it's dating late 40s, but the Nordic countries, that includes Scandinavia and Finland and Iceland, geographically have been cooperating since many, many years. Now, we heard Diana saying that one of the reasons why she's co-producing is also financial reasons, not necessarily the only one, but also financial reason. You come from Sweden. Sweden, years ago, was essentially co-producing only with Denmark, a little bit with Norway. Recently, the Nordic countries have discovered the rest of the world, and they are co-producing with other countries. Poland, for instance, Spain, and so forth. Tell us, what is your take on this? What is your approach to co-production? Why do you do co-production? Are you forced to do co-production? Do you need to share your cake, like Peter was saying, with other producers, because you cannot find resources sufficiently to own your own cake yourself? Or do you do it for other reasons?
You hear me? Yeah. Well, this is exactly what happened to me. Well, I should never mention this, but about 20 years ago, when I started out on my own. And I was so intrigued. So I was probably extremely naive and really just wanted to connect, because I sort of fell in love with projects and talents that were not necessarily Swedish. And I could never understand when I was sort of, I was working for the distributor production company Sonnet Films, who did many successful Nordic co-productions and imported great films. I never understood why they never worked internationally. So for me it was like a very strange thing. And I remember I had an early conversation with a fantastic CEO back then at the Swedish Film Institute, who was a distinguished gentleman who had been working in the Nordic countries, and he, why would you want to do that? And I said, because I like it. It gives me energy, it brings something to the table, there's new perspectives. I even co-produced shorts, which was crazy because it was super complicated and there was no reason to it. I just couldn't help myself, I guess. But the thing is, Scandinavia, there's been a support system culturally that we should support each other. I think it's like in any neighboring countries that there's a lot of Belgian French co-production, or Swiss German, or Swiss Austrian, and Italian. You know, we all have our, and the Eastern Europe countries working, you know, close borders, which is all great. But I think it's a real danger, because this is when you close, this is when it goes to regional again. We go back to telling just one kind of stories. We have amazing, and I work with myself, I think amazing auteurs from both Sweden and Denmark and Norway, and I love working with the Scandinavians as well. So it's more of trying to find, each project is unique. And for me the reason was creative reasons and culture, I mean just making the project better, making it get out there in many more places.
You could have done it 100% in Sweden, but the choice of
Yes.
having a co-production was more a philosophical approach
Yes.
to the film.
And that's why I said that most likely was quite naive when I started. But the thing is, now it turns out you can't do it without doing it. It's almost impossible to finance a film if it's not very local subject, or you have. We co-produce within, we have fantastic regional funds, as you know, the Film i Väst, the Film i Skåne, and in the north of Sweden. But it's, so for certain films that's enough. When you have like a big distributor and you put up like more local, like in Germany, that you can fully finance within the sort of ecosystem of the regional fundings. But anything else, and I would say if I wouldn't have co-produced my best was in Swedish films, I wouldn't have had those international successes on those films either. Because we went to these countries and festivals and won prizes, and so of course we all want the best mix. It's like international success, critical success, domestic box office. That's and it happened like once. But that's like, but you should not stop to think that the other is taking, you know, what do you say? The other one is excluding the other. We have to be a bit, you know, megalomanian in our way of thinking sometimes.
Many years ago, when I started working in co-production, the feeling I had around me was that co-productions were those kind of films that were so specific that they wouldn't find enough resources, not because of the size of the country, but because of the topic that was chosen. There was this kind of underlying prejudice according to which the film, they were successful, they would find resources within the boundaries of the territory taken into consideration. And co-productions were those that were so niche, so controversial, so complicated that they needed to knock on the door of the neighbors. But then, while working in supporting co-production and understanding them better, I realized something different, and I would like to have your take on this. Co-productions, at least the ones that I see regularly in EURIMAGES, have often public support in most of the co-producing countries, which means that that project has gone through a selective process in different territories, be it public support, be it television, sometimes distributors if the topic interest markets, which means that maybe is what you were saying as well, Esther, and also Elena, the producer was forced to confront him or herself with other territories, other cultures, through another producer that had to go through another selection through public support or television. So the result is that in reality those co-productions are not bad, therefore they cannot find sources of financing their own territory, but they are pretty good because they have been successful in getting support in different territories. Now, pretty good does not mean anything in terms of revenues, circulation, audience. It means that it went through different channels and it had some sort of itinerary whereby the original idea was transformed into something that could be understood from different countries, different cultures, different languages. Maybe this is one of the explanations why those films made through co-production circulate better. I'm not sure why they generate more revenues, but that's maybe is something that Lucia can tell us. Lucia, you are the head of the media program. Everybody knows that the media program does many things, from training to development to promotion, market access, and even more than that. But the biggest chunk of the budget is for distribution. Now, when you have conceived the support schemes for distribution in the media program, did you take into consideration the difference between 100% national films and co-productions? And if you haven't, will you do that in the future? I know that you are, we discussed yesterday, you are already thinking about the future of the media program in a few years. Is this something that you are thinking of, taking into consideration?
Yes, but before going to distribution, I would like also to say a few words, because I really, what Esther and Darius have said really resonated to us. And indeed, our starting point is always our DNA is looking, making the best possible circulation of European content. And of course, co-production, we thought, and the data from the observatory really confirmed that, is a very good ingredient to make film circulate better. Actually, for example, out of the 4 media-supported movies here in the official competition in Cannes this year, the 4 are co-productions. But what we, and you mentioned the many diverse schemes through which we support co-productions, but the idea is also to create a breeding ground for co-productions, create a community. In Europe, we promote freedom of services, freedom of goods, but actually we haven't promoted enough free circulation of creativity and culture. And these are precisely a very, very important component that through co-productions, creating this collaboration mindset we promote. And the evaluations, all the evaluations that we have done in the context of the media program have really shown that beyond the intrinsic value of circulation, there is a much deeper value in really creating this community of practitioners, of people from the industry working together. And actually, when really preparing ourselves for the very, very difficult discussions on budget for the period after 2020, what we put forward is precisely those elements into the table. And I think this has been a very, very convincing argument, because as you are probably aware, the European Commission has put up proposals where the budget of the media program will be significantly increased, more than 30% increase. And these elements play a role as well. So I think it's important to see these co-productions not only from a strictly economical point of view, not only thinking about the circulation of content, but really creating this shared community of values. So coming back now to your question on distribution. Yes, what we are thinking now is that in this, we have really fostered and incentivized collaboration on co-productions. But the question we are asking ourselves is, have we really incentivized similar collaboration among distributors? Have we incentivized that collaboration between sales agents, between those that are really, really distributing the movies and reaching out to the audiences? And here we think that we need to bring this cooperation to the next level. There are perhaps new models that we could try out in order really to foster and amplify the circulation of those movies. It is a bit early to say how we are practically going to do it. We are in intense discussions with distributors, but we think that this is perhaps where we can learn from the positive lessons of other schemes in the media program and really try to create a more shared culture of distribution across the union for the benefit of the films, for the benefit of the whole value chain, and also for the benefit of the audiences.
Thank you, Lucia. Go ahead. Thank you, Lucia, because this is music to my ears. One of the one of the objectives of EURIMAGES, as you can imagine, is stimulating cooperation between producers established in different countries. And of course, the incentive of having the financial support works well, and EURIMAGES is going to be 30-year-old next year. I think the achievement is not only the output, the number of co-productions made, that those co-productions circulate well, that some of them have had awards. We have 20 films in Cannes this year, it's 7 in competition, which is excellent. But what we cannot measure, and it's, I think you touched upon it in a very clear way, is that working together made through co-productions, created something that the rules, the economics, that the internal market cannot create, and that is a real community of filmmakers that are working together, that know each other, they share the same way of working, the same concept of what cinema should be doing, and you realize this by looking at how co-producers chooses each other throughout their career, and how they keep on making films with the same producers established in different countries because they share the same point of view. It has become a community that you cannot measure through, I mean, it's difficult to measure this through indicators, but this was exactly the objective of a fund like EURIMAGES, creating a community, stimulating cooperation, not only financial but also artistic and technical. And this brings us to Maya Capello, who is, after Gilles Fontaine, going to introduce us the regulatory framework. In the meantime, Diana has to go because one of the main reasons why she was in Cannes was a film, and she has a press conference, so she has to... Not made yet, but...
Thank you.
So, thank you, Diana.